people show up. I've been having trouble getting.
I know, like you guys, I mean, you do a great job with all the communications. I don't know if it's just summertime agents or
I mean, it's been like this all year.
has it?
Like 3 or 4 people show up.
I wonder. I don't know if y'all. I wonder if it makes. I wonder if we should like. I say we, but like. Do we do like a survey again about, hey, trying to find out why are people not showing up? I mean, I've started to start with myself. I'm trying to think. Obviously, the topic's relevant. Of course, all the new agents should be in here.
Yeah.
So hopefully they'll all come in, or a lot of them. But yeah, what is it? Why is it? I'll ask myself that question. Like I didn't go to Pages last week because I've sat in on that one so many times. And
Yeah, that'd be a good topic. I think we're Paige is gonna do open house follow-up next month.
oh, okay, so that's kind of that's actually the same theme,
Yeah.
so that's good. I figured she has all that down too, so. Yeah. Yeah, I think it's good to just brainstorm topics. That might be a good survey to agents. Hey, any ideas? What do you wanna?
The last survey I put out,
No
all the
response.
class, no, I got responses, but we have all the classes
Okay,
they were
and then they just
requesting.
didn't show up. What will it take to get you to show up?
Yeah,
How are you? I'm Eric Decker.
Brian went.
Brian, okay, I haven't met you yet. So are you?
I'm new. I'm
new?
new to office.
Okay.
A couple of weeks.
Oh,
3
well,
weeks. Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
Are you? Hey, Brenda, I was hoping you were coming.
They have one going under contract today, so.
All right, relevant.
I need this today.
Well, this will be very relevant. Are you newly licensed?
Yeah, I'm new license. Yeah.
what do we need?
Okay, thank you. Awesome, well, congrats.
Oh yeah.
Big first step.
Yeah. So we start from beginning. Everything needs to be.
Right, okay, so yeah, so what I like to tell people in your shoes, right, I mean, just in general, not anything to do with this class, but just my advice is always, you're here, you're learning, you're absorbing, a lot of it just might go right over the head just because you haven't done it, or it's just also new. I mean, you're drinking from a fire hose, the old cliche, right? Your first, right, Brenda, 90 days. What I did and gained so much from is just being here like you are now, coming to the office as much as you can, listening to other agents, have calls, and just doing your training, doing your, there's so much coaching. Eventually they'll teach it. I also teach Ignite. So at some point you'll be able to take Ignite, which is really what gets you going. But all this is helpful too. So let's see, do we have anybody on? We'll get started. Hey everybody, I'm Eric Decker. Since we're recording, this is under contract. Now what? What do we do? So if you guys don't mind, keep your eye on if anybody pops into the room. I think we'll be able to see it on screen. So Grace said she was gonna come in on Zoom. All right. So a little bit about me. Eric Decker, as I said, I know Brenda knows me. I have been a full-time agent for 8 years. I started in 2015, January. So that's my anniversary. And I, came from another career. So I was a new agent at that time. And I've never looked back, and it's just been the time of my life. I love this business. I've been at this office since June of 2016. So I was at the Keller Williams Buckhead office, which is also a Rawls Group office, from when I started until June of 16. So I worked on a team when I was at the Buckhead office. That was great. And then I became a solo agent when I came here. I am, was on the ALC a couple years ago, so been in Jim's top 20% group, for several years. Top producer, I've taught Ignite several times, done a few group coaching classes, so glad to be here to just be with you guys and share. This is really a discussion. I don't have anything formal to put up on the screen, but I do have a great agenda and topics, and this is very conversational. That's what I love about group coaching, because I want you guys to just hear what I've done. And everybody has their own way, but these steps, I guarantee you, the majority of agents should be taking all these steps because we have to, because the goal is to get to closing, right? So, hey, Grace.
Hello.
We're just getting started, so I just did an introduction. I know we know each other, so anyway, well, let's get started. So I'll just start off by saying you worked hard to get here, to this point, because we're under contract now, and that is a huge success, right? And what did it take to get there? I mean, you want to celebrate because you just got a contract, and you should celebrate because it's a huge milestone, right? So I'm going to just highlight some of the things that you accomplished to get to being under contract, okay? And I'm going to go kind of quickly through this, and I've got my notes and stuff just to reference. So what is our main job? What's our main job? Lead generation. Because otherwise, how did you get a contract, right? Every day we have to be lead generating. You followed up. You lead generate. Okay, maybe you talk to somebody. We have to follow up. You got the appointment. How many times do you have to follow up to get an appointment, Brenda?
A bunch.
Now you got the appointment. How many times does the appointment stay in place? What if they cancel any things like that? So that's what that follow-up is about, right? So not only did you get the appointment, but you had the appointment. And then with a little bit of luck, but all your hard work and diligence, you secured the agreement. Got to have an agreement to get to the point of getting under contract. Now, an agreement, we have two kinds of agreements. What are our two kinds of agreements?
BBA, sellers.
So buyer agreement and seller agreement, right? Close this a little bit. Let's keep it open until. All right. So yes, buyer agreement, seller agreement. So we're going to talk about both scenarios, because I made a list of things to do after you go into contract. Depends on if you're working with a buyer or the seller.
Do you have a checklist that you get for that?
Great question, and I'll say yes, sort of. And I'm going to go into that. So Brenda, right now you said you're about, when we started this class, you're about to go under contract. Is that with a buyer or a seller?
The seller.
Okay, seller. All right. So again, we're gonna talk about both. The main thing I'll say is, you get a contract. Guess what? You can't put down your regular daily job of lead generating, following up, getting appointments, going on appointments, securing agreements. Because without that every day, we've got no future contracts. So this is where the mindset of the kind of putting your all your hard work and your efforts, obviously doing what you need to know what is to be done, but we're also going to talk about leverage to be able to do some of these things. And I'm about to explain to you what needs to be done after you go under contract, because you own it, meaning you're going to oversee it. It doesn't mean you have to do the things that I'm about to tell you. That makes sense? Now, I personally agree. I think I want to know how to do everything, and I want to know how to do everything and do everything once before I delegate those tasks, meaning what we're about to say, under contract, task to somebody else. And I think most agents would agree with that. They at least want to know how to do it, know what to do, obviously have a checklist. So, and we'll talk about quite a bit about leverage. Go figure, they gotta start doing yard work right now. All right, and we still have Grace. I don't see anybody else in it. Okay. Okay, so why don't we start with the buyer? Let's say we get a buyer brokerage agreement. Okay. Correct. So really quickly, I'll go through these things, these steps. To get that, so after you get your buyer brokerage agreement, what are you gonna start doing? Looking for houses. Correct. So there's a few tasks you have to do. You have to set up your FMLS searches. Well, let me back up for 1 second. After you get your buyer agreement, now this may have happened right before you. Well, after you get the buyer agreement, you need to meet with your buyer to maybe to fine tune some of those requirements that you may have gotten, through the buyer consultation, because the buyer consultation is how you basically win over the buyer, right? You're meeting with them, you're sitting with them. You're going to go over some of what their requirements are, because you need to know if you want to work with them, right? Okay, so moving forward, you get all that done. You get the requirements, you got the agreement, now you're ready to go show homes. How many homes do you show before you go under contract? Probably, I mean, that's a tough question to answer. If you're lucky, maybe 5. In this market, in the past couple of years, 25, 30, 50. Talk to any agent in the office, buyer's agents. Sometimes I've shown buyers for a year. I think you did. You may have an example. Well, not quite, but
No, I started last December.
that's right. But I can tell you, some buyers, it takes a while, especially in this market.
Yeah.
Okay, so endurance is key to your mindset, meaning patience. But it's just keep going every single day. Okay, so you showed several homes. When I show several homes and they like them, I'm also pulling the disclosures from the listing. I may have to contact the listing agent. And then you send them to the buyer. Usually I do that before we put in an offer. I want them to have full comfort in what those disclosures look like. You start reviewing comps. And now I'll turn it over. Grace and Brenda, you guys chime in. What are some other things that you do? Now we're at this point of before making an offer, and we'll do these, quickly. What is one other thing you do that you think of when you help your buyer towards getting under contract with an offer?
Where you look at the disclosures, you review the comps of the area, see if they're in the right thing. And then, we gotta make sure their financing is good. They had a financial appointment, they're pre-approved and all that, so you can go in with confidence and put down a contract.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, and I like getting the feedback too, because I want to know where to fill in, because there's a lot of things, and we'll do some Q&A at the end for follow-up notes. So that is one thing that's absolutely a necessity. I'm getting that during the buyer consult.
Right.
So we'll say, yes, that should be included, but back in that earlier step. So anything else, Grace, at this point of helping your buyer get under contract? Reviewed disclosures, reviewed comps. You're discussing an offer, right? After you reviewed comps, because your buyer is going to be looking to you, hey, what do you think we should offer? 99 out of 100 times they want you to help them figure out the offer. And through the data you're pulling, you guys decide that together, right? It's never your ultimate. So you want to just give as much info you can and have your buyer help them make the decision. So then you negotiate the offer with the other agent. You presented the offer. And you got to negotiate. I mean, now in this competitive market, I'm competing against sometimes 10, 15 offers. So that relationship with that other agent is key in negotiating. And it's always picking up the phone as a buyer's agent, calling that seller's agent. Getting that warm and fuzzy relationship. Hey, tell me about your seller's needs. I want you to know about my buyer, because I want to win the offer, right? So you're putting on the old cliche dog and pony show to win. And, there's a lot that can go behind that too, of putting your buyer's best foot forward. That's what your goal is as a buyer's agent, especially in this stage, trying to win the offer. So then let's say you won the offer. Okay, you're under contract. You got a binding contract. Now what?
Inspection.
First on my list is, now when you say inspection, what do you mean by that? We're gonna talk about these specific steps.
Mhm.
So talk about that.
Well, whatever you put in your contract on the due diligence, you gotta have an inspector lined up that can do that, because, we put in, for my young couple that we're looking for, we put in 5 contracts. We won one, and all of them, we put 3 days due diligence. And I had already checked with my inspector, if we put this contract in, will you be able to accommodate the 3 days to get
Right.
that inspection?
Right.
And then one of them, the one we won, we actually got one of our contracts accepted, but then the inspection came back so bad that they actually pulled the house off the market and
Right.
fixed those things. And there was nothing in the disclosures.
So Brenda said a key point. She made 5 offers. Now that may freak some agents out, but that's okay. You can do that. And because of the due diligence period, let's say you got accepted by all 5 and you're like, what? No, it's okay. You terminate 4, or you may find out you got picked. There's that period of back and forth of going binding. So you're probably not even binding with those other 4 or any of them yet. So it's okay to offer on multiple properties. So that's another discussion.
Sorry, I couldn't talk earlier. I tried to sign on to another laptop. But just going back a little bit, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I do get them pre-called at the beginning, but then sometimes if it's a little tight, once they found something, I will send the address over to the lender. So he'll look at it to see once they add the HOA, once they add taxes, if it's not making them, if they're still within the DTI parameters.
Yeah, so that's all falls into the buyer qualification consultation process. So, definitely that's a good point, Grace. And also, yeah, so we're bucketing that into those upfront steps that I was talking about at the beginning of just getting that buyer secured as a buyer, through your buyer agreement. Before you sign an agreement, you want to know that they're already qualified, and you help them do that even before you sign a buyer agreement. Because if you don't even know what price to search for if they're not pre-qualified or pre-approved, right? So that's a whole nother topic. We could have a group coaching class on that. I think Jeff Hart's gonna step in. He told me he wanted to step into the class today, so we can chat with him later.
But if you have a cash buyer, you don't have to worry.
Yeah,
You just
right.
have to have proof of funds, right?
That's right. And I just closed one cash buyer most recently as a listing agent. And I've closed several. So yeah, that's a much smoother process, less tasks you have to follow up on and things like that, because there's no lender involved. Yeah. Okay. So where we were is we're under contract. Now what? So we have to get the inspection scheduled. Sometimes before I'm even binding on the buyer contract, I'm calling my inspector if I've gotten my buyer's approval. Now, one thing you want to communicate with your buyer is, here's a question I would ask them. Would you like me to schedule the inspection for you through one of my preferred home inspectors? I have several. Would you like a list of them to call them yourself? Sometimes they want to shop just like lenders, they want to shop home inspection companies because maybe money, which, you know, for most people, if it's a buyer that is very conscientious about all the costs and things like that, there's a cost to it. That's really their main skin in the game going under contract on a house during due diligence, because they can back out, of course, but that home inspection is going to cost them money. So you just want to ask the questions. Hey, would you like me to schedule the inspection for you through one of our, right? Or do you prefer? Yes. And so most times they tell you to do it. I trust you. You know, obviously it's building, you've built that relationship, right? You've come from experience. Now, obviously being a new agent, that's okay. You got all of us around you. All right, tell me your first name one more time.
Brian.
Brian, yeah, so Brian's a brand new agent, you know, so you're learning a lot, you know, you've got all of us that can share our resources and things like that. You go under contract, you know, you get a buyer tomorrow, don't worry, we can all help you. That's the beauty of our team here. Your goal is just to get a buyer, right? Right now, right? All of us, we all need buyers and sellers right now. What else? What else? Okay, so let's say we got the inspection done. What is another task? There's several. But what's the next maybe task that you want to start thinking about? You want to get earnest money. So in the contract, right, on page 1, there's an earnest money amount and there's an earnest money due date. So you as the buyer's agent, we're talking about tasks for buyer's agents. We're going to get to seller's agent shortly. You got to get that earnest money. That is ultra critical. You've got to get that from your buyer. There's different ways to do it. We have electronic means now through 2 apps. Deposit Link is the most preferred because it's cheaper. If they want to just do it electronically, it's a $10 fee to the buyer, and it comes right to our office. It goes in their escrow account. There's also Earnest. Earnest is another app. That's $15. So Deposit Link is the way to go, I think, and that's what our office for money. Or you pick up a check from them. You can tell your buyer to bring it to the office. But guess what? What this is about is you are responsible. And it's time. It takes time. And I'm going to emphasize this because you don't have to do this because of what we talked about at the beginning of class, leveraging. So again, I want you to know what needs to be done, but then you're going to oversee making sure that stuff's done, which can be done through an assistant. Okay. So you've got the inspection scheduled. Let's say you are in a 3-day due diligence period, which is common these days. 3 to 5, but that's something you negotiated when you won the contract, right? You gotta meet. I personally like to meet with my buyer and the inspector at the home inspection. Not only you saw it quickly to do the showing, now you want to understand what are the issues, because there's always issues. Something's going to come up. So you meet with the inspector and the buyer. You know, I always meet with them at the end of the inspection. Don't get in the inspector's way. You don't really have to go to the inspection. I will tell you, some agents refuse to go. They want that time for the buyer and the inspector, and I completely agree with that. You also want to continue building rapport with your buyer, that you're there for them. You're a second set of eyes. You want to build that trust, and you're not there to discuss or talk. I mean, if they ask you questions, great. But I meet at the end of the inspection with the inspector. Sometimes the buyer's not even there. I will tell my buyer, hey, I'm going to go meet the inspector for 20 minutes. I want them to tell me about the highlights of the issues, and that's it. They've spent 2-3 hours getting all the boring stuff done. I'd never meet for an entire inspection because you're bored. You don't want your buyer to either, okay? Because you're going to get a full report. And you can have a phone call with the inspector even after. If nobody can go to the inspection, that's okay too. The inspector's there. They've gotten paid to give us all the info we need to know, and we can have a conference call together. So there's a lot of ways you can handle that. Grace, jump in anytime since I'm not always looking at the screen. So after meeting with the inspector and the buyer, if that's the case, then what?
you send,
And it's all still related to the inspection.
okay, gotta send that report to the financial, the lender.
Well, we're not there yet.
Okay.
So what do we have to do after we get let's say we get the home inspection report? There's a lot that's gotta be done to get this
Yeah.
thing going.
The, what is it, ATAC?
Correct. What does that stand for? I'm glad you said ATAC. What does ATAC mean?
Amendment to address concerns.
Yes.
So you said you have to type that out and send that back for signatures, send it to the other agent, then there's negotiation that takes place again.
That's right. So perfect segue. So the first thing though, as a buyer's agent, before you even send the ATAC, this is your role as an agent. I mean, you don't leverage this to an assistant. She said it, you have to negotiate. You have to first, I'll say, negotiate with your own buyer on what it is you're gonna ask for. How do you know what to ask for from the seller?
Usually the big items, the ones in red, I learned that real quick.
That's right.
The
And
ones
red
in
is a
red.
summary report that the inspector gives us. In their full report, they break the critical issues down in a summary. Usually it's the last, sometimes the first page, a lot of times it's the last page of the report. Every inspector is a little different. Yeah, that's where you start to review. The home inspection report is critical. And there's definitely a list of things that don't even worry about, but you need to know what that is compared to what is critical. And that takes experience, right? I mean, and that's where I would tell even you guys, right? If you haven't been down that road too much, you've done it, because I know you've secured, right? Have you had, okay, not yet. Grace, I know you've closed deals, so you've, dealt with amendments to address concerns. So anyway, again, you guys, my phone's always available. Agents can call me. It's just, because when you find issues, you don't know what it's gonna cost to fix it, right? So who might we call to help you? Again, we haven't even sent the ATAC to the sellers yet, because we don't know what to ask for. We don't know how much things cost. So what do? You call a contract
Estimate.
to get quotes, right? So that's after experience of, over time, you've built your list of allied partners, your allied resources, and that includes contractors, plumbers, electricians, general contractors, crawl space engineers. I mean, the list goes on. I mean, a roofer. So that's something you want to build as an agent, is just getting those allied resources together, because on a moment's notice, you need to be able to call people. Because you guys, I will tell you, that is, during due diligence, in my opinion, is the most stressful time of the entire cycle of a contract. Because you're under a limited time, you're under a deadline. And your buyer is counting on you to win that deal and get them to the closing table. The pressure's on. You busted your tail getting them under contract, showing homes for 6 months, who knows? Now you're under contract and you get to an inspection and oh my gosh, there's mold in the crawl space, there's roof damage, there's electrical issues, and you've got 3 days or 5 days to figure it out. Hold up, take a deep breath. And you phone a friend. You got lifelines. I remember feeling that pressure. Oh my God, there's no way I'm gonna just break down. No. It gets easier and easier over time the more you do. You gotta go through it. So that first 1 or 2, don't worry, it's gonna be stressful, just accept it.
But at least we have a checklist what to do.
Yeah, that's right. Well, in the heat of the moment, you call me or you call somebody. Another experienced agent, we've got 325 of them here. Give or take, not the new agents, right? But there's plenty. So yeah, you gotta get the amendment to, we'll call it the ATAC, worked out. So we have, speaking of contractors, Quan, Keller Williams Land North, has a list of preferred contractors. You know
I've
about
seen
that?
that.
You've seen it, Brenda? Okay, you'll see that. Talk to Kimberly. If you don't know where that is, she's put a whole resource page. You start with them, right? As a new agent, I didn't know anybody. Start with them. They are preferred here in our office because most agents have recommended them or they have built that relationship. So call them. That's your first call. If you have to have help figuring that out, right? At this point in my career, I can just kind of go through the summary notes and say, yeah, that's important, or no, that's not important, right? So, okay, so you're helping your buyer with those quotes, okay? Sometimes you can get lucky. I just had a listing and the buyer's agent did not send me an ATAC. I was like, yeah, I'm getting paid.
Nice.
That never happens, by the way. I was lucky. But I'll get to that in a little bit. The seller's agent side of it. You'll jump in anytime. So then, yes, Brenda said a minute ago, you present the ATAC to the listing agent after you've worked it out with your buyer. And sometimes you're having late night calls with your buyer, figuring it out, or an early morning call. Guess what? They have full-time jobs. You got to figure out the schedule. You guys, all this is your time, and this is something you have to do. Okay, so just know this is an effort. This is a critical component, milestone, time period, whatever you want to call it, to get them over the hump, to get them to the closing table. So, okay, you presented the ATAC to the listing agent. Here you go. It's like presenting your offer. Here's another offer. This one's for repair requests. Now, let me ease your mind for a minute. You want to have I'm going to back up for 1 second. You can have a discussion with your buyer to say, and you may need to call the listing agent to say, hey, talk about options. Maybe you just negotiate money. But you still want to know what things cost, because how do you know how much money to negotiate?
Right.
And money, I mean, in two forms, either a reduction in the sales price or it's a quiz too. What else can you negotiate? I'll just say it, closing cost money.
Okay.
That takes some of the relief off the stress of, oh, because you got to write up a whole list of ATAC repairs and things on the ATAC. So if you've gotten quotes for all those things, and your buyer says, oh, I don't want the seller to fix anything. I want money, and I want to do it after closing. What if it's something you should have the seller do before closing? You know, so there's a lot of things that you have that go into this to lead your buyer down the right path, making the right decisions. You're also having discussions with the listing agent. Hey, listing agent, are you open? Is your seller open to fixing things? Maybe they're trying to relocate and they don't have time. So the relationship with your co-op agent is absolutely critical to get any deal done. Okay, even at this point in time. So you're asking, hey, would your seller be okay if we just ask for money? Most sellers like that because then they don't have to fix anything. Yeah. And personally, unless it's, I say there's some things that maybe should be done before, but that's a discussion with your buyer. If there's water damage, if there's mold, or if there's something that the day of closing would cause the house to just, you know, safety issues with electrical, you know, you don't want the house to catch on fire the day of closing or after closing, right? So there's certain things that I recommend maybe that the seller do. So it just depends. So all of this say there's a lot of communication and that takes time and you're under a deadline. Okay. So let's say then after you've presented the ATAC to the listing agent, you've then negotiated what I was just saying, repairs or money. And then they agree, maybe, before they agree, maybe there's a counter offer. You give them a list of 20 things or 10,000 in repairs. the seller and their agent comes back to you and says, we can do half of it, we can do 3 of those things, or we'll give you 2,500. What if you don't like that? What if you're meaning your buyer? I'm speaking for your buyer. What if your buyer doesn't? It's negotiating. So think of this due diligence period of negotiating repairs is like negotiating your offer up front. It's another round of negotiating. You tell your buyer that you prepare them up front. Hey, next steps after going under contract, we've got more negotiating to do. Right? This is the long, you're walking them through it, you're guiding them through it.
The one that I did, we had like 5 major concerns. And then they agreed to fix 4 of them. And I went back to the buyers and they were okay with the 4 because they did the biggies. They were okay to accept 4 out of the 5. And so we were able to move forward with that.
Right.
And then we had to have it proof of them doing the things, either receipts or, when we go back and look at it.
That's right.
So we had that written in there as well.
That's right. Yeah, there's a lot of things you could stipulate in the amendment to address concerns. Yes, you need to see those receipts 3 days before closing, because you want to know these things are done. You're going to do a final walkthrough, so those are some follow-up steps. Just keep in mind, this is all, it's give and take, because in this market, sellers don't have to give a lot, because guess what? You just competed against 8 other offers and you won, and they can hold that against you. Oh, don't be picky, Eric. Don't be picky. That's the relationship with the agent. So, a lot of negotiating. That is your main role.
Stop you 1 minute, guys. I want you to know what kind of talent you have sitting up front of here. So I'm going to present Eric this award right now. He was a top producer, $7 million in sales, life member with top 10% of the whole board into production in excess of $7 million. Top 10% in the board, that's 12,000 people. That's kind of talent you have up here this morning. Teacher, so can we give him a hand?
Made my day, sir. Thank you.
That's exciting.
I appreciate you.
Appreciate a lot.
And I can't get there without great leadership too. So we got a great leader in this office. We have multiple great leaders.
There's like great leadership, because I'm here. I'm glad you're here learning more from the best.
Thank you,
See you
sir.
guys, 100%.
Appreciate you.
I appreciate you more.
Yeah, this is fun to me. I love to give back. I wouldn't say all agents like to teach or mentor or coach or whatever. This is a true passion with me. I think of this sitting in front of my sellers and buyers. There's nothing that excites me more than to sit in front of our sellers and buyers. And when you're in flow with your client, you guys, it's the most rewarding part of this business. And when getting to the closing table and getting that check, yeah, that we all want that. I don't think about that. I just work hard and I keep my nose to the grind, and I know I'm going to get paid. But I'm not breathing it. That's not during all this, you guys, we got to get to some more stuff here. So it's rewarding though. And I want you to always know at the end of the line of this transaction, you've earned it, because it's hard to get that paycheck. You got to keep going every day. Right, Grace? We'll check in on you every now and then.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There.
Yeah. It knocked me off. I had to call, but I'm trying to stay in as long as I can. Thank you.
That's okay. No worries. We're recording, so anybody can watch it later too. I appreciate you being here.
No, that's all.
Okay. So then you've gotten the binding. We'll call it the binding ATAC. Whoo, man! Sit back. Let's celebrate again. You guys, this is a big win too. How many hours and late nights did you just spend in the last 3 days getting quotes from contractors, figuring things out with your buyer, negotiating with the seller's agent? Oh my gosh, sometimes you got to meet the contractor at the house. You got to schedule, I got to come in, you got due diligence, you got to schedule those things. All right. And you could have your assistant helping you with some of that. Again, I say that theoretically, because that's going to be a future team member you're going to have. So then I'm going to go through some of this quickly. Send the ATAC to all parties. So you got to make sure, now this could be an assistant. You got to make sure that just like they got the binding contract, You gotta make sure you got the binding ATAC to all parties, and that includes the lender, the, closing attorney, this, obviously the seller. So, okay, we're past due diligence. You've won that. Meaning you've got a win-win. It's always a win-win in negotiating due diligence, right? Then you gotta start following up with the lender, right? If it's not a cash deal, as a buyer's agent, you need to know how your buyer's doing on financing, right? Hopefully you're starting with Jeff Hart with Supreme, Reed Clark with Silverton, our two preferred lender teams. They've got team members that help them as well, so you've got other loan officers. Because they're right here. Jeff may pop in. So they're easy calls because they pick up our phone calls. So work with lenders you know and trust, like these two. Because they are critical in this getting your buyer to the closing table. That's where it starts. Not meaning it continues, I'll say, is getting their financing done. Because okay, we're through due diligence. What is the next critical milestone of a buyer contract that has a loan that you are waiting for to be done? Any guesses? Okay, the appraisal. It is, I would tell you, the last more stressful hurdle. Next, in my opinion, behind the inspection. So if you feel good about the offer you put in, great. If your listing agent feels good about their list price, their contract price, I should say. What if you overbid to win the deal? So that's kind of a thought process you want to keep in the back of your mind when you're negotiating the offer for your buyer. Obviously, the lender is telling you, yes, they can afford $30,000 above list price. You've gotten all that figured out. I didn't mention earlier, but again, that's part of making sure they can buy the house at that over asking price because you had to compete against 8 offers. So therefore, then the follow-up is at this point you're under contract is making sure that their financing is going smoothly. That lender is pulling documents from the buyer. Again, that's not your job, but your job is to check in and communicate. Hey Jeff, how are things going? Emails, text, phone. Usually email. You want to document things. Always emails, right? Now your assistant could be doing this. Leverage. Guess what, guys? Let me pause for a second. Because what should you be doing every day instead of working in a contract? Key activities, 5 key activities. I'm going to send all this to you if you would like it. You guys can text or call me. You lead generate. You got to follow up. You got the appointment. You got to get more appointments. You got to win more agreements. So you got to do all that every day. So that's where the leverage down the road. Maybe not right now. Maybe you can't afford it. That's a limiting belief. I'm still struggling with it. Don't worry. I don't have an assistant, by the way. I pay contract to close coordinators so I can take my signed contract and pass it off to them. They do all those things, follow up with the lender. Yeah, I recommend that right away. You don't have to hire them. They're a pay as you go. You pay them a set fee to manage your contract, but they're not a team member. Meaning they're not a hired employee that you have to worry about, right? So you're checking with the lender on the buyer status, financing and appraisal. So the next step, like I said, you have an appraisal contingency deadline, just like you had a due diligence deadline. Your appraisal contingency deadline, which is part of your initial, your binding contract on the financing exhibit, is, let's say it's 14 days from the time you go binding. Well, you got to be following up. You don't want that date to be missed, because what if the appraisal comes in low? You want to then, because guess what you get to do then? Negotiate again. Third round of negotiating, appraisal. If it comes in below your contract price, if it comes in at contract price or higher, what are we doing? Just have another little celebration. Open a glass, pop a glass of wine. Tell your buyers how excited you are too. I haven't had a lot of low appraisals, I will tell you, in my 8 years. I think I can count on one hand, thankfully. Everybody wants the appraisal to come back.
Yeah, I've never had one.
Good,
They'll
right?
come-
That,
Yeah.
that we all want.
On point or a bit over. I'm quite surprised. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. I've heard appraisals are coming in a little bit low. All right, I'm gonna move forward because I want to get to the seller's agent side. I know time just flies by, so. Okay, so let's say the appraisal comes in low, because this is where the talking points are. You gotta negotiate again. So this is where you get your lender involved, your loan officer. The appraisal comes in low. Your goal is to then negotiate with the seller's agent and the seller. Hey, let's say the contract price is $550, appraisal comes back at $540. You're gonna tell the agent, you're gonna, hey, this is what the house is worth. I need you to reduce your price to $540. Seller's like, I got 7 other offers. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, you're not gonna terminate. We're not gonna terminate this, are we? Let's negotiate. Now, you could challenge the appraisal and you get your loan officer involved with that. I've had to do that a few times. Maybe you didn't like the appraisal comps that the appraiser put in there. Now, a lot of the comps should be the comps you pulled before you even made the offer for your buyer. Hopefully you're seeing the same comps. Now, again, that's not always the case. You could challenge the appraisal and say, hey, I'm not agreeing with this. Well, that takes some experience too as an agent to be able to, how do you do that? Well, you know, get your lender involved, right? Now the lender, they don't have any control over the appraiser. That's not allowed, okay? So, but they could order a new appraisal if you have time. So I'm not gonna go too deep into all that, but those are some conversations you have with your lender. I didn't know if Jeff, he may have gotten on a call. I was hoping he may pop in. Okay. The main thing is you have to negotiate. There's an exhibit for, I forget the exact name, amendment to reduce sales price, I think it is. Something like that, I'm forgetting. And then you present that to you have your buyer sign it, you present that to your seller's agent, to the seller, for the price that the appraisal came back on, and you provide them a copy of the appraisal report to the seller's agent. They need to see what it is. I didn't mention earlier, but just like when you are in inspection period, you may want to give the home inspection report with your ATAC, because that way they know what you're asking for. So I always ask the buyer, is it okay if I give them that? And they usually say yes. You don't have to though. You just give them an ATAC. Okay. Okay, so let's say we've negotiated the appraisal. Yay, we're good. Hopefully it's good anyway, but if you had to negotiate, I will tell you, if it terminates from a low appraisal, you guys, depends on how much money we're talking about. The seller does not want to lose that contract. I can tell you. And you as an agent, you want to talk to your other agent to say, because no one does. No agent, the agents aren't going to get paid, the seller's not going to get paid, the buyer's not going to win a house. Everybody wants to win. So usually you come to an agreement. 9 times out of 10, you might meet in the middle somewhere. Or hopefully you get the seller to just agree to the price of the appraisal. But if you have to negotiate because, oh, I understand you got 7 other buyers that are, you know, chomping at the bit. Maybe they have a backup offer for a higher price. Oh, that's a whole nother thing to think about. What if they made a backup offer and they're under contract as a backup? So you, as a buyer's agent, you don't want to lose that. Right? So it's negotiating with the other side. All right, so let's say we got through that. Then you're scheduling the closing time with your buyer and the attorney. You want to make sure that could be an admin task. I would recommend it. Receive closing statement 3 days before closing, whatever. And then you go to closing and you get paid. Now, I might be forgetting a few things. Anybody can chime in. I know we don't have a big crowd. We got Grace on the phone, but Grace, anything I'm missing? Because you're the most next seasoned agent besides me on this call. No worries if not. So as a seller's agent, it's kind of put on the reverse cap, right? A lot of it, there's overlap, but you're more on the receiving end, right? Another great reason I like being a listing agent, a seller's agent, you guys. There's a lot of reasons to love being a seller's agent. And this is a seller's agent.
Yeah, we're trying to work out a deal right now.
I know Grace has gotten listings. Okay, let me go through this list, seller's agent. And again, I'll send you guys this. I don't mind sending this. It's just a format, a list, a checklist that I started. Now there's going to be more, so take it for what it is. Seller's agent, like I said, get earnest money. You want to make sure you get a copy of the earnest money from the buyer's agent. Okay, so that's a calendar blocking thing. As a seller's agent, as soon as I get my binding contract, so we're back to you just went binding on the contract. There's a checklist of things as a listing agent, because I don't want my seller to be knowing what's going on. I need to get my seller information. And again, the admin, as a seller's agent, you can also have an admin doing the same thing. Meaning that could be the contract to close coordinator, right? That's who I'm really talking about right now. Because you're paying them one set fee to do these tasks for you. Because my goal is to go get more leads. My goal is to go get more listings, primarily. We know how long of a cycle that is to do that. So focus on lead gen and business development and try to, but these are things you just have to know. You need to make sure that you get a copy of that earnest money, because that's on the contract. You're going to get a call or an email or text from the buyer's agent asking you for your lockbox CVS code. So that's just a little admin task, because the inspector has to get into the house. So these are just little time-consuming things that you're going to have to probably do because they're going to text you. They may not, if you tell them about your admin, they may not remember who it is. They're just going to text you because that's who they know. Communicate the inspection with the seller. So you gotta make sure the house is available for the inspection. So you gotta coordinate that, again, an admin task. What I'll do before I send this out is I'm gonna go highlight what things should be admin tasks. Okay, so you kind of see, because you'll know what your main responsibilities are versus what can be leveraged. Okay. You're gonna receive and review the ATAC with the seller. So once the buyer did their part, maybe they spent 2 days getting quotes, right? Like we talked about earlier. Now, part of due diligence is also the seller's due diligence. Think about it. What if it's a 2 or 3 day due diligence, the buyer takes 2.5 days of it, and then they send you a whole list of repairs and you're like, I don't know how much that costs as a seller's agent. How am I going to have time to? So it's both parties due diligence, and I communicate that with my client and with the other agent. Is sometimes I've literally gotten ATACs the day, 4 or 5 hours before the deadline of due diligence. So sometimes you have to extend due diligence. That's another negotiation. Hey, I need 1 or 2 more days. Let's make this fair. Hey, let's both take a little more time. You have to ask your client first. Hey, seller, are you willing to do that? They may be like, no, we want to get this thing done. It all depends. But you also, as a seller's agent, one of the things I'm doing at that due diligence part is if I'm not hearing back from the buyer's agent rather quickly, and I know when that inspection is as a seller's agent, right? Because you've given them access to the house. I am calling that buyer's agent right after inspection. Hey, anything critical come up? This is before you get the amendment, the ATAC, right? I want to know, is there anything critical? Because you're getting ahead of things. You're under the clock. 3 days due diligence. So good agents that are buyer's agents, I know when I'm representing the buyer, I am giving that courtesy to the listing agent. I am contacting them as soon as I can. Again, this is after consulting with your buyer. I'm giving that courtesy. Hey, just FYI, there's mold in the crawl space. there's a leak in the roof. Cause you don't wanna, again, you don't want the deal to terminate either. Neither side does. So help each other. You're helping the other agent win the deal. It's a win-win. It's got a win-win or no deal. It's win-win or no deal. Right? That's one of our Y, 4, C, 2 Ps. Look, first one, win-win or no deal. Okay. So kind of what we talked about earlier, you negotiate the ATAC, you help your seller get quotes if need be. That's always to be determined. Negotiate repairs or money, right? My sellers, yeah, like I said, they love it when it's just money. You get the binding ATAC, same thing. Okay, so after all that, you get to that follow up with the buyer and the lender. So you as a seller's agent can also talk to the lender of the buyer. There is nothing wrong with that. Because your seller is wondering what's going on with the buyer's financing. They'll be calling me, Eric, haven't heard anything. How's their loan process going? You know, they just want to know. And the good lenders are also communicating to the seller's agent. They're working for the buyer, but they're also, because they don't want the deal to fall through either. They don't want us calling them, hey lender, what's going on? You get something like that, haven't heard a thing. And you may call the buyer's agent first as the seller's agent, but you have full access to that lender. And if you don't trust what the buyer's agent's saying, there's a lot of bad agents out there that don't communicate well. And I'm talking outside this building. We are all trained well to communicate well. It's where it starts. Communication, one of the on the list. Seek first to understand. Communication, right? So that is our number one job as an agent, whether you're on the buyer side or the seller side with our client. You are the communicator of what's going on. Any questions? I meant to pause earlier to see any questions about anything so far. Good stuff.
I might later, once I get your,
Okay.
once I
Yeah.
get your printout or whatever, I might have questions later.
Oh, sure. Okay. So we may get that appraisal report at this juncture, right? So as the seller's agent, you then, just like the buyer did with their buyer, now we get that low appraisal, you're talking to your seller. Hey, are you okay with reducing the price to 540? They're leaning on you to give them advice. So you're having that call with your seller. You know, I'm saying, hey, seller, keep in mind, they got 7 offers. The appraisal came in. I've reviewed the appraisal report as a seller's agent. I'm also running comps on my listing at the contract price, right? So you're evaluating a lot of conditions and a lot of factors. What if something closed recently within that comp set from the time you went under contract to the time that you got the appraisal? Keep that in mind. And that's something I promise and communicate with my sellers up front at that. The time we get the listing is, hey, Mr. or Miss Seller, I'm going to continue to follow the market because there's a lot of factors that could affect not just our listing and getting the buyer, getting under contract, but once we go under contract and then the appraisal is going to be done, what if there's new comps that play in? And you hope that that lender or the appraiser has gotten it. Because that's something as a listing agent, you may have to give some comps that they may have missed in the appraisal report. Right? And this is a task that you need to own. Like you can have your assistant, not a contract or close coordinator, because they're only handling things, but this is like negotiating stuff. You always handle negotiating stuff. You want to find good comps, present to the lender and the appraiser, hey, I think this can help support a higher, which that's when you're kind of challenging the low appraisal. And it just could be a discussion with the buyer's agent to say, hey, I feel pretty good about 550. That listing agent might be saying, I've got a backup offer. That's how the listing agent, the seller's agent can leverage, maybe not reducing the price. You don't want it to terminate, because guess what? The buyer's in control. The seller can't terminate. The buyer can send a unilateral notice to terminate if they don't like what, you know what I'm saying? So again, you gotta get to a win-win. That is the goal. And usually you do. Because everybody knows how hard it is to get to closing.
So let's say that an appraisal does come in low and your buyer is financing. Go to the seller's agent and say, hey, can you reduce your price because our appraisal came in low? But then your seller says, well, I've got 6 other offers. Surely not all of those people are gonna be cash. So if the appraisal came in low for you, let's say maybe you have 1 cash offer. Well, maybe that would seal the deal, but it's like if everyone else is financing too, do you think their appraisal report is gonna be the same as yours? Or is that a risk that you run, or how do you work around that?
Excellent segue and point. So yes, those are some risks and factors you have to discuss with your seller. The quick answer is, hey, seller, we're gonna have to go through this again if you don't agree. But let's come to a win-win. You may have to give a little, but we don't really want to start all over. Maybe you do, if you've got a backup offer that, but to your point, they're gonna also get the inspection. They're gonna have to go through the inspection again. They're gonna have to go through the appraisal again, to your point, and risk it. So is it really worth that time? The answer is 99% no. And your seller will usually agree, no, Eric, I don't want to go through. Because then they gotta let the next inspector into their house, the next buyer, it just starts over. So time is money. Great point.
Also, one that I learned about when we got the contract accepted was that this was with an FHA loan or something, but that we would give a certain amount
Right.
for the appraisal and then be willing to pay a couple of $1,000 more
Right.
for that. And I learned about that recently.
That is all, that's all part of the negotiating process as the buyer's agent and the seller's agent, meaning, like, I'll say quickly, if I'm the seller's agent, I'm gonna decide, wow, I've got 8 offers, 3 are FHA, you know, some are conventional, most are maybe a cash. Well, that's a whole nother topic, right? Sadly, FHA buyers, a lot of them don't win because of the perception of those things. So we won't go into that, but yes, that's another topic. That's a critical one. So I know we're wrapping up here, but kind of the same as what I said on the buyer side. So after you've negotiated the appraisal, hopefully the win-win situation, is you want to make sure your seller's comfortable with the closing time. You know, you're communicating with the other agent. Hey, when is your buyer planning? You know, you've already got the date, but scheduling the closing time, communicating that. Again, that can be a leverage task. That should be. Receive the closing statement, because as a seller's agent, you want to know what the closing statement looks like, so you can review it before closing to make sure all the numbers match up. Meaning, that's not your seller may have questions about it. The buyer's got a lot more to look at, especially if they have a loan. But so I didn't say that earlier, but on the buyer's side, you may want to talk with your lender as well, but the lender and the attorney have come together several days before closing to make sure all the numbers are on the closing statement correctly. But you want to have a review of that before closing, whether you're on the buyer side or the seller side. You want the seller's gonna, the clients both are gonna get their side of the statements. And you just take a look. You obviously want to make sure your commission's on there correctly too. Oh, by the way, I forgot, you gotta submit your commission statement to get paid, your pay at close. I didn't add that, I forgot it, see? So there's several tasks. That's a leverage task. That's a contract to close coordinator task. Getting command updated. I did forget to mention some of that. But commands, hopefully you're all going to use command if you're not already. That's all I use. You have to use it to get paid. But it's my database, it's where everything happens from lead gen on. So it's a great tool. Questions? And I know it's 12:03, but I'm flexible to stay around a bit and we can have Q&A. You know. So I'm gonna go back through this discussion and add some notes, like I said, just kind of, because I want to have this is good documentation in case I ever teach this again, obviously, but also to provide it to you guys. Let me put my information. I think Brenda, you have my info, probably, right? I'll put it up here. I should have written it on the beginning. Questions, anyone? Anything? And I'll just make this easy. That's my email, obviously name, so there's no dots, so it's ericdecker@kw.com. Okay, and my cell. So email me if you guys don't mind, just so I don't forget, and I'll send you this list. Grace, you still on? Any questions? I'll go ahead and for the recording, whoever watches it later, thank you. And it's a good topic, so hopefully you got something out of it. Thank you.